being a neighbour for this meeting.
Yeah, good. No problem. Well, on board.
Thank you.
So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Infrastructure Committee. Welcome to those of you in the chamber and also those of you watching from home. We have apologies from Councillor Pottinger, from Councillor Kett, and from Mayor Clark.
Move.
Thank you. Seconder. Thanks, Barry. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I was going to say that Mayor Clark sends his regards. I spoke to him this morning and he is doing really well.
Awesome. Good stuff.
Are there any declarations of interest relevant to the papers today? We have no public forum, so we'll move to the minutes of the Infrastructure Committee meeting held on the 5th of December.
Move those.
I'll second those.
Thank you. Is there any discussion of those? And if not, all those in favour say aye.
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 Against? Carried. Thank you. Tab 5 is the intention to exchange the Southern Greenway land for road. So, this is Caroline.
Good afternoon. The paper you've got in front of you is addressing a long-standing matter that was initially brought to Council in April 2011. The public consultation on the reserves exchange was carried out at that time. The road stopping process to complete the exchange was not. Therefore, there was a considerable amount of time has elapsed since then, and it's appropriate to revisit the public consultation for the exchange of the reserve land, and it's intended out to do both consultations simultaneously, so that's the road stopping and the exchange of land. So the land benefit. No,
Apologies for my tardiness.
I got that far. Should I carry on? Yes. Okay, cool. So the exchange of land will benefit the community, including the future walking and cycling trails and connections to existing ones, together with improving the road safety. There are proposals within the plans to tidy existing access ways, and it includes a proposal for future development on the land which is being considered for disposal at 231 Scott Street.
Thank you, Caroline. Are there any questions of Caroline? And if not, will somebody, well, we have 5 recommendations.
Sorry, Chair. One question. It's not a groundbreaker at all. I'm just wondering, do we know why we paused in 2011 and didn't action it? Is there any? I know that predates you, but
I can probably speak to that because I would have been here then in the parks area. I think it's to do with the road stopping area part of it, and that public consultation with road stopping would have been a completely separate consultation process, and it is a slightly different process where we have to notify every adjacent landowner as well individually. So it may have just got tied up in the system.
as long as there wasn't a barrier, no pun intended.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, Leslie.
Can I move it and can I say it's been a long and winding road?
That's actually quite straight to the road.
That takes me back
That's actually
to
Leslie, I
It
think
takes
that's
me
why
back a long way.
I think that's why we're doing
Progress.
exchange, so it's not a long winding road. So it's going to be straight on.
Yeah,
we
that's
would,
the point,
we would
yeah.
like to think so, Mr. Chair, but let's get to the next stage. So I'm happy to move 1 to 5.
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Okay. Is there any other discussion?
Well, just
Yes.
one question. So I like the intent of the cycleway and the use, but is that pragmatic and practical? Like, is there funding available to make this part of the National Cycleway Network? And could we do that? And I think that helps with some of the consultation, because people may be wondering, well, what are you going to do with it? And if we've got some, vision and equally understanding that we actually can turn it into a cycleway, for example. So have we done any exploration around, national network cycleways, those sorts of things, and Active Southland, ask them any questions about have they got an appetite to develop this up, or are we just saying this is what it could be?
It's what it was deemed to be at the time of the initial consultation, and there is a current strategy being reviewed and written on this at the moment. So we're hoping to add this piece of land into that.
A strategy on what?
Cycleway.
Okay, so how's that funded?
The consultation's being undertaken through Great South currently.
Right. Okay.
So it's not got to the stage where we've got management plans, which would then set the funding aside.
And that looks at funding as well?
I would anticipate it will do, Councillor Dimity, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So we have a move and a second. I presume Leslie and Alex, you're still happy to do that on that basis of that answer. So all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. So that takes us to tab 6, the temporary road closures for the Invercargill South to City.
Chair, we're just waiting for Doug to come down as infrastructure's started a little bit early. Can I suggest that we move to the activities report just to give him a few more minutes? I do know he's on his way.
Okay, so we'll go to tab 10, activities report. I presume, and you're going to present that. Is there anything you want to say in advance of taking questions?
The key piece I'd just like to draw attention to is the Branksholme water main burst. Council will know for some time that it's been on our radar that that's a critical asset for the city and that it is at end of life. We're obviously well progressed with the duplicate pipeline into the city. However, we are some time away from that full length of pipeline being completed. What the multiple bursts that we had over the Christmas break has identified for us is that we are definitely hitting some end-of-life risk associated with that pipe. Therefore, the team are actually looking at whether we can enliven the first completed stages of the Branksholme pipeline early and are working with the contractor around, the construction contractor for the pipeline, around mobilising a second team to assist us to do that so that it doesn't impact the construction work that's already underway, but that we're able to get that pipeline and bring additional resilience online earlier than we had planned.
Okay. Are there any questions of Erin about that whole report? Okay. Grant first.
Yeah, so just with respect, page 3 of 11 of the report, or 87 ball books, just the Lithgow Street water main. Couple of things trying to understand there. There's a heck of a lot of water. Impact on residents and recourse around insurance. Have we looked after them? And then secondly, was that a surprise in terms of the age of that infrastructure? Have we sort of post-reviewed it around, are there any signals for, hey, we should go and check elsewhere in the network where there are things in that?
So the first piece is that absolutely it's our policy that if we impact a residence through failure of our infrastructure, that we would step in and be as accommodating as we could in that situation, including in the past we've put people up in hotels and those sorts of things while we tidy up their properties. That wasn't needed in this instance. It was confined to the public property and a little bit of people's yards. Right. Around that particular one, it's not one that we've got on the list for renewal in the near future, so we are just going back and having a look at whether it's an isolated incident or whether we need to pull that one forward in the program.
But equally some other second question, sorry, Chair, other similar aged pieces of infrastructure that we need to go and have a bit of a look at?
We don't have. In the past, I've been aware of, in other roles that I've had, where you start to see a trend of a particular type of pipe at a particular age, where you start to believe you might have gotten a poor quality batch of pipe being rolled out within the network. Yeah. That's not, if we became aware of something like that, that's something that we'd look at, but at this stage, no. That being said, I've spoken before around the need for our asset management analytics to be more mature than they are now. And potentially, if we were at that higher level of maturity, we may see more in that space, but it's something that we're starting to build into at the moment.
Okay. And then another question, page 7 or 11, just with respect to Bluff Road between the heavy traffic bypass when it comes back onto the main Bluff Road and then heads down past the hospital. and I think it was raised in a meeting last year about the state of that road, and I think it is a Wakakatahi resource because it's State Highway 1.
Mm.
Have we had any luck in getting them to elevate that in terms of its need for urgent repair?
Not luck in, as we're aware, in elevating the urgency of it. We have fed it back in, but we're not aware of that being escalated up their work program at this stage.
So we're
But we can
continuing to
continue
bark and
to-
chase?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Evelyn.
Yes, just on page 5 of 11, I think that you have 2 or 3 instances where you've gotten the year wrong.
Oh.
I think you're doing end of January 2024, end of March 2024, and mid-February 2024. And I'm going to put it down to the fact that we no longer write cheques, and so we don't write the dates so often, because that's why I do it.
I think it was more around the fact that this report was prepared at the beginning of January and people were still not quite in the habit of doing 2024. Thank you. I can confirm it is May 2024 and March 2024.
Thank you.
And-
Evelyn. Sorry, Trish first.
Again, just with regard to housing, we're not making a dent on it at all, are we? And we have got those stirrup places coming on, but we're really we do really need to see what we can do to bring that housing down. It's been sitting at that number for some time.
I think what I would say around that is it's a supply and demand issue. At the moment, all council staff have the ability to increase that supply. We obviously do have some funding earmarked in the next long-term plan around doing that, and there's work that we're doing with central government around whether we can get their support to also support a program and contribute funds. But that's all sort of pending the outcome of the long-term plan.
Yeah, and I realise that. I was just wanting to raise it again, so it's in our vision. Thanks.
Thanks, Trish. Alan.
A couple of quick questions. Sorry. Just wondering about those decorations in Esk Street. Was there a cost involved with putting those there, or was it just a trial sample thing?
No, absolutely. There was a cost involved in putting those decorations in there.
Do you mind elaborating on how much it was?
As I believe they were almost in the range of about $15,000 across the 3. So they weren't a cheap item to put in place. Something that we want to have a look at as to whether or not council considered that they added value and whether they want to see more of that sort of installation.
Is there any thought, next question, is there any thought to, there was a time when we had, well, a couple of comments on the decorations initially. This year they didn't go up till the end of the first week in January, in December, when Christmas was already well underway. So it was probably three weeks too late. But besides that, is there any thought of having them back up Tay Street and further down Don Street? Because there's really only like 4 strings of them across the road, and they look great, but it looks a bit lame because there's so few. Is there any thought to doing something down Tay Street like they used to be? I notice the poles are a little bit different to what they used to be outside the city block there, but I mean that would be an easy fix.
The key piece that we have is that the last major investment that council made in Christmas decorations is coming to end of life. We're putting up what we are still able to, and you would have seen that we were able to put up obviously the lights in D Street, but we weren't able to have that same impact on Tay Street, and that was simply to do with the fixings now were unable to be put up. It was something that we discussed actually at our ELT meeting today, in that we've not had a coordinated approach across council to how we deal with it. There's individual teams doing a little bit here and then doing a little bit there, and it's something that we need to have a better approach to going forward.
There is a plan.
There was a piece of work that was initiated within my team last year, and we put out a request for interest on who could assist us with some planning around Christmas, and we were keen to push the button in May last year around getting some of those pieces of work constructed. What we were advised is we were too late at May last year for Christmas last year, that we would need to have anything in by the end of March this year. So that's what we need to work to, is to get that done
is it worth doing a plan and bringing it to council for us
I'm
have a
happy
look
to
at
take guidance
if
on
you are doing a plan? Because
Yeah.
to be fair, those trees look a bit lame too. The you know, the triangular trees with the lights on them.
I think it's good, Alan, that you have raised it, and it's even better to hear that the executive committee have been discussing it already, because it's obviously much too late. We tend to think about these things about October or something, and then it's gone, isn't it?
Exactly.
So really good that we've had. So maybe your next activities report, you could maybe update us on that, would you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Any other? Nobody else? I've got a question, Erin. Could you just speak a little bit about the reason for the second failure in the Branksome water main? I understood the first one. It seemed like a heck of a coincidence that the second failure would happen at the same time. Was there a common cause, or what's your view on that?
It is a little bit of guesswork and assumptions. It may have been caused by the vibration of the heavy machinery around the pipe while we had the pipe exposed. There are some things there around, frankly, whether we were gentle enough putting the fill back on, whether we undermined it a little bit too much when we were doing it. It's a pretty fine balance. No way of knowing for certain, but there's definitely, I think, some learnings that we can take out of it to make sure that we are addressing those things going forward in case they were contributing factors.
Okay, thank you. Did we pressure test? It was maybe a matter of just pressure test?
No, that was prior to that.
That was what?
That was prior to the testing.
Okay, thank you. Evelyn?
Just to follow up to what was said about the lights, I'm really mindful that people enjoy them. However, the ones that were in Esk Street are accessible differently, and I wonder if that's where we should be looking rather than the overhead ones, because I'm really mindful that putting in the overhead light, the across the street and all the rest of it, is hugely resource consuming. It means that people have to go up on big equipment, roads have to be blocked, all those sorts of things. Perhaps if we're talking about this is the time we need to think about whether we should be moving away from those stringed lights and looking at the more modern LED displays and things like that can be, I don't say put in more easily, that's probably the wrong way to say it, but less labour intensive, more pre-planned and using technology. And also, given that we are in the kind of financial circumstances we are, whether that would be a more cost-effective way of building a display, because I thought the lights that were in Esk Street were actually quite effective. Young children could see them and they didn't have to wait until 10:30 at night, because I think the reason that our lights go up so late is because it's too light, when we're not in winter like they are in the UK, and I think we just do it wrong. So I'd be really interested in a conversation that looked at doing our Christmas lighting differently, and less resource intensive.
Some of the things that to respond to that, some of the things that we've investigated is whether or not lights provide us the best effect, completely to that point, or whether or not we're better to do some installations that you can interact with better, some aluminium presents in the street or in the reserves, Christmas baubles, those sorts of items, as opposed to necessarily be reliant on lighting alone.
Okay, I suppose the question that almost dares not speak its name is the one that maybe we should do it for Winterfest rather than for Christmas, but that's, I almost never see the Christmas lights, I must admit, because I see them, but they're, it's daylight when I see them. Anyway, that's not I'm just raising the question.
Oh, well, that is the point though, isn't it? That the timeliness of that. So if we are talking about celebrating the birth of Christ, which is quite a different thing, then okay, December is when most of the world does that. But if we're talking about lighting or as celebrating within our city, and that could be at other times of the year, then how we do that and what we use to do that. Because the reason that, you know, we had a couple of goes at putting them up in winter, it was terribly damaging to the lights, to the infrastructure of them. But if we could find a different way of doing those things, maybe we could be more responsive to other things like Diwali and all those other festivals that take place. And to your point, Mr. Chair, doing something in winter that is uplifting and cheering at a time when things are a little bit darker and greyer.
So I think, thanks Ellen, and I think you made a number of points, and I think obviously Erin cannot respond to all of them, but I think the point should be, you should be thinking about them, so that when you do come back, and maybe it's not, I mean, it'd be useful to have an update next month and where you've got thinking about this Christmas, but at some point further down the track, you know, we really should have a paper more broadly on the whole question of lights. I'm even going to put the word Christmas in front of it, because there never is a lot of Christmas lights in Bethlehem when it happened, really. It was
just a star.
He's a big star.
Quite the star,
Barry.
really.
Sorry?
Quite
Barry,
the star.
whatever he is.
Yeah.
Barry?
Councillor Dermody brought up a really good idea last night at the Bluff Community Council about having a solid. Sorry to take that away from you, Grant.
It's a secret.
Yeah,
Not now.
you can finish it off if you want. But,
No, you go.
with the flags and everything down in Bluff, they blow to bits. There's strong winds down there. And could we get some sort of solid, sort of a thing that comes off the poles that doesn't get damaged and put lights on them? You can finish it off, Grant, because you.
Well, I was going to just raise that. Can we include Bluff and sort of our strategy around, you know, Christmas decoration lights? But equally, you know, I think Tom's got a good point, and it's a bit Teeverland as well. You know, and there'll be a few people that say, "Oh gosh," but including probably my mother. But you know, maybe we look at it at a light strategy, and we've talked about lighting up our old buildings, and you know, in winter time, and so we are called the City of Water and Light. So maybe it's a wider piece, and then what part do Christmas lights play within our lighting strategy, for want of a better term? But yeah, we did have a bit of a chat about it at Bluff, and we think we can come up with some sort of stuff that's weatherproof down there. We're just
So clearly we are nothing. I don't think this conversation is going to take us to anything with respect to this coming Christmas, which is probably going to be, you know, your traditional, just as best we can. So, but maybe what we're thinking about is what it might be, you know, the year after.
Yeah, that's right.
And whether then we can think about, you know, Winterfest approach, or you know, or Diwali, or whatever the you know the appropriate festival would be, Matariki or whatever. So I think we've got Steve.
Oh no, I just, to Grant's point, just wanted to just make sure that Bluff was a consideration in the decorations and that strategy. I had lots of comments around the state of the flags, as I'm sure many councillors did. Also, I liked the S Street decorations. I thought that was really cool and inspired. Lots of great feedback from what I saw on the street and on social media. And I would say don't rule out the Christmas. I love the Christmas lights. It's a tradition when they get lit up, and I guess don't underestimate the power of the professionals' lights Christmas display around those houses. Lots of families, lots of the public, and there probably hundreds of thousands are getting out at night and appreciating the lights we put up in the city. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Thanks, Leslie.
Totally, thanks, Mr. Chair. Totally agree with the inclusion of Bluff, but I just want to say, if we're going to look at a light strategy, can we also please include South City and Windsor?
Yeah, that's
the
right.
same issue in Bluff of those flags being blown to bits was a big concern for Windsor, and I think also for South City, but certainly heard from the Windsor retailers. So I think if we're going to look at a light strategy, we need to include Bluff,
Citywide,
Central Invercargill,
Absolutely.
and those two shopping.
Just a comment, now that you do talk about South City, to be honest, when you drive through South City at night time with those big lights on poles, it actually looks great. And of course they're up all year round.
It's an example.
And they obviously, they're not affected by weather, and I think maybe that's something like that might be a possible option, even more long term. So it's really just a matter of switching them on, because they look great. You drive through South City at night time, any night, and it looks great.
Anything else? Anya?
I just wanted to add on to the Buff conversation is that some of the discussion was more around Christmas types of decorations that were made out of stainless steel that could be decorated with actually lights rather than signs. So I just want to say that was more than just having a sign.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we broadened this discussion to the point where it's a complete rethink of our, light strategy. It was probably a bit, goes a bit further than Erin's activity report next month.
Conversation
But
started.
maybe Erin and Michael, I mean, would it be reasonable to say that, within 6 months, a paper could be brought back to council about on the broader issue of strategy?
Through yourself, Chair, I think 6 months might be a little bit late in relation to the delivery of the Christmas.
No, I'm not talking about this year. I'm talking about beyond that. So this year is Erin's report.
And I think what we'd be saying is that at the moment, the strategy that we have is to hopefully build a little bit each year, simply because also we're somewhat funding constrained. But obviously a piece of work around doing something
broader strategy. I'm talking about longer term.
Through yourself, Chair, we can take that on board. I'm just mindful I don't yet have any staff directly working on it, but having said that, I'll work with my team and see what we can do.
It's a question that the best time that you can do it, but maybe with the objective of trying to do something for 2025. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So, let's see, what do we get to? So we have. Right. So will somebody move that we receive the activities report? Thank you, Evelyn, and seconded by Leslie. All those in favour say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against, carried. So that takes us back to the temporary road closures, I think.
That's right.
So Doug.
So the first one you're considering, Mr. Chair, is the Invercargill Surf to City temporary road closure. Fairly standard approach where we will work with the organiser for temporary road closures and management of the event on the day. Our team are working closely with them at the moment. I'm happy to answer any questions on this.
Just one question. I'm just wondering why Duns Road, you've got applied from 9 AM to 1:30 PM, yet you further down you say that you expect it to be open at 11 o'clock. Why do you need to have it closed to 1:30?
I actually don't have the details for that, sir. I think it would likely be for clean up and tidy up afterwards.
So I couldn't hear you, Doug. Sorry, say that again.
Sorry, through the chair. I don't have any details on why it is 1:30. I was led to believe that that is the standard time that it operates.
So my understanding is that it's a progressive reopening.
Yeah, it is.
So the reopening commences. It'll start reopening from 11, with everything being open by 1:30.
Yeah. So I think it would probably be useful, given that there are traders in these areas, to be able to give them maybe a more accurate.
Correct.
Just by 1:30.
The difficulty with that is it does somewhat depend on the pace of the people coming
Just
through.
What Erin is trying to say is whether or not I'm doing it.
But they leave at 9 o'clock and not through there at 11 o'clock.
It's one of those pieces
Yeah,
where
there's a cut-off point at at 11 o'clock.
They're not coming through, are they?
Just put a gate up.
People
What's the
would
limit?
go back and pick up their cars from close to the beach where they have been parked. So it's actually an interesting scenario about how long and how many people are going into the city and then going back to pick up their vehicles.
True.
So
what I would say though is that it's a, as a resident of Otatara, it does generally work reasonably smoothly. I think that it's a community that's reasonably used to it, and we don't tend to get a significant concern raised following the event.
Yeah, as a former resident, Mr. Chair, of Otatara, I can attest to that. It's a minor inconvenience, and it really is very well organised.
As a trader in Otatara, I wouldn't mind a wee bit more
the
clarity.
traders that are the issue.
Certainly will investigate soon.
So what happens? Does it, as soon as you are able, does it reopen, or do you wait till 1:30 irrespective?
It's progressively opened as stated, but it depends on where, how far in people are. So we do have to wait for the last person to rumble over the line. So
right, okay. I mean, the last 50 you could offer a free beer to or something like that. Or just nip into Alan's place on the way back.
It's
and
going
you
to
can open
slow me
early.
down.
You don't think that hastens
Adults
things?
only, not children.
Yes. I'm happy to move the report, Chair.
Okay,
I'm confident in the
thank you.
provider.
Yeah,
Panya,
I can
any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried.
Mr. Chair, I did have a comment, but you weren't looking. Can we please do something about the macrons that are missing in this report? There should be one on the O in Oreti, there should be one on the O in Waihopai. If we need to do something about the spell check IT program, could we please do it? Because it's actually annoying. Changes the meanings of words.
One that I can feed back. We're currently doing a piece around our reporting standards to make sure that we bring alignment through all of our reporting. It's something that we can feed back into that process.
through the chair, I'll certainly note that. I think it's not a willingness problem; it's more a technical knowledge problem and how to put that in. So we'll work on it.
But I think it's appropriate that Evelyn keeps raising it because it's. I mean, you know, we should be wise enough now that we pick up on it. So, okay, thank you. So we have done that. I think we've moved and seconded. Okay. So then we move to tab 7, the intersection safety report, on page 52 of both books. And I think this is you again, Doug, isn't it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a follow-up to a report you received just before Christmas regarding the options we had for the Yarrow Street Lindisfarne intersection, where we intend to signalise this intersection this year. And I think last time I covered the crash history of that site, there's problems with visibility and certainly massive problems with headway, with gaps between traffic to make decisions, and people are forced to hurry those decisions. So we have, whilst there's not a terrible crash rate, there is a lot of crashes and they have the potential to be serious depending on the speed environment changing. So our plan, the report covers most of our options there. We are recommending the option that, option 1, which is the one which takes out more parking than option 2.
Okay, questions to Doug?
Chair, I'm happy to move the 3 recommendations with option 1. I think it's a great move and about time, and I wish it had been 10 years ago when I was doing 30 trips a week backwards and forwards to the football turf, but it was like running the gauntlet, so that if this is going to make it safer for people, that's a good thing.
Okay, so you'll be moving a second, but we will take questions because there are some. Steve, I think you were one? Trish. No, Trish, sorry.
Yes, my last question. I do have sympathy for those traders there. Some of them are migrants to the city and they've really built up a business, and taking away the parking, it's really, you know, it's difficult for them, obviously. Option 2 did provide some extra parking space. Can you explain, Dave, why that would be disadvantageous to us to go to option 2?
Trish, could I maybe ask that you bring the microphone closer to you? Thanks.
Sorry. I'm just like to consider the traders at Lindisfarne, and I was looking at option 2 as possible, but I didn't understand what we were losing by going for option 2, except the extra parking space.
Through the chair, I'm joined by Grant Fisher, my colleague here, who's part of the design team that put this together. We did visit the outlet you were talking about. We had a site visit with them, and we took on board the concerns. This is the kebab shop particularly.
Yes,
they have a travelling one with parking, and yeah, they are valid concerns that they hold. However, there are minimum standards that we need to stick to, because we have quite a lot of different modes. So we have pedestrians, school kids, we have cyclists as well as vehicles. So we've got to consider that in terms of our minimum design standards. Grant might be able to cover a bit more here.
Yeah, sure. It was particularly in relation to the we call them the tapers for the cycle lane.
Yes, yeah.
Bringing the taper in at a more severe angle under option 2 has the effect of almost it feels like a narrowing of the cycle lane, and so that's a narrowing and a squeezing of the cycle lane where we've also got turning traffic, turning bay, like a right turn bay in particular. And so really it just squeezes that intersection down even more, so we potentially lose some efficiency, but also it's not as safe as option 1 for cyclists in particular.
Can you just
Through you-
confirm?
sorry.
I'm sorry, no, go Trish.
Just through you, is there a space around in Lindisfarne for them to use as an alternate?
Through the chair, we did actually talk to them about that. What we've committed to with the kebab shop is to come back to them and work through some options for that short-term parking. And in Lindisfarne, there certainly is an option for us to do that. It, again, not ideal, but it will work for short-term parking. So we are working through those issues with the kebab shop.
Because I believe that's the problem, isn't it? It's a short term, it's just dropping in, getting in, yeah.
Absolutely, it's pick up, drop off.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much.
I mean, it's an issue that we need to take account of. Can you just confirm though? I think I read in here that the extra distance that someone who parks has to walk to get to the kebab shop is 15 metres. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's,
which is like from me to you, Trish. So it's not a long way.
Yeah.
But I know the old Invercargill concern that unless you can park straight outside the shop, then. But 15 metres is not a long way. But is there sufficient parking at that distance? Or
kebabs get cold quickly.
If it's option 1, it's nearly 3 times that.
Say again?
If it's option 1, it's nearly 3 times that. It's not 15 metres.
Yeah, okay.
It's about 45 metres, 50 metres.
Really? It says 15 metres in here.
On option 1.
Width of the regular section.
It's right about, it's before the house before it. Before the house before the first shop.
There's also parking on Lindisfarne Street.
Well, that's what I just asked.
Round the corner. That's not the same length.
But it's on the other side of the road.
No, it's on the other side.
Both sides.
Okay. Alan, it was actually your turn next. Was there another question you had?
Questions. I think it's a bit of overkill. There's a couple of questions. Have you ever done a cyclist count?
Yeah, that's
what I was going to ask.
That's number one question. I mean, because to be fair, I drive a lot, and I very rarely see cyclists.
That doesn't mean they're not there.
Maybe you should open your eyes.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, you're doing something huge here for cyclists. Yet are they actually using the road? And that's going to affect these guys' businesses. That's my first question. Have you done a cyclist count?
Through the chair, no, we have not done a survey of cyclists, nor have we done one of pedestrians. The general funding envelopes that we work with and been encouraged by the last GPOs, the government policy statement, is to encourage alternative modes of travel, and accommodating that with city infrastructure has been a driving force, and certainly up the road where I'm from, it's been massive. We've seen the cycleways in Dunedin.
So you haven't done a cycle count, okay? That's
no,
my first
we have
question.
not, no.
My second question is, this is an arterial road, and you're talking about putting a raised middle part in it. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Similar to Windsor Street?
Yes, yes.
So do you not think that you're just going to make people who would normally use that as their arterial route for getting home, because Yarra Street is an arterial road, they're just going to perhaps go onto a St Andrew Street or Tate Street, and you're going to end up with the same problems?
Through the chair, no, I can't comment on that because that needs to be modelled on a network-wide basis. So we have to look at it as an individual intersection. The focus on this improvement is safety and safety first.
18 accidents over 5 years.
Yeah,
that's 3.6 accidents a year.
You may just clarify though, the requirement for I don't know what they call them, a bump type bar. Is there a requirement for that in an act someplace, or is that something that we're doing on a completely discretionary basis?
My understanding it is, through the chair, my understanding is it comes as a design standard. I'll let Grant cover that a bit in more detail.
But we have traffic lights all over the place and they don't have bump bars, so are we saying that we don't comply anywhere else?
Going forward, particularly under the previous GPS, it will be a requirement to obtain NZTA funding to put a raised platform through a signalised intersection. And it's in alignment with the safe systems process with how we look at upgrading of signalised intersections, or sorry, converting existing intersections into signalised intersections now.
So is that the case at this point? Or are you saying that if we wish to access funding for this, we need to include that design feature?
In the future, going forward?
Well, I'm talking about this one.
Talking about this one. So it wasn't a strict requirement of NZTA's funding for this particular one,
Right.
but putting a platform through the intersection is safe systems aligned. Not having it is not safe systems aligned. And there's been a bit of a shift in how we look at intersections and how we align things with a safe system and the intervening time from probably 3+ years ago when we would have sought funding initially for this intersection upgrade. It was the subject of quite a bit of discussion within our team, but we got to the point where we thought, why wouldn't we do it? We know that we need to comply with the safe system when we're upgrading intersections. So what's stopping us doing it in this?
I'm not finished.
We've got a list of people waiting to speak, but I'm going to give Alan another go before we.
Right. My third thing is some funding is coming from the government. How much is this going to cost us?
Just 600, 300 in the ballpark.
Probably a bit more than that, actually. At the moment. So we are looking in that region of probably around the 400,000, I would say. At the moment, we're still confirming final quantities with our engineer because they're still just finalising the 3D design, and we still need to work through that.
My last question is: can you give me an accident count on Isabella Street and Yarra Street?
I can come back to you with that.
We can.
I think you might find it somewhere.
Sorry, I was going to say we can confirm that we're also looking closely at that intersection.
Okay.
So we're going to be spending 400 to 600,000 on every intersection.
So you'll see that there is a paper later on that talks about Doug bringing back a program, a paper around intersection safety.
And I think I'm going to vote against it, option 1 and option 2, because I think this is a massive waste of money at this particular point in time.
Why? Because of the number of accidents.
Yeah.
18 accidents over 5 years.
Yep.
Now, if you go through a stop sign, you shouldn't have a driver's license. What happened to
That is
more
of no
prosecutions?
comfort to the people who are the victims of those accidents.
Well, you've got to encourage
Alan,
that.
rather than have a cross table, I mean, you've made
That's
your
right.
point, so thanks.
I made my
Barry.
point.
Have we not looked at putting a roundabout on there rather than having
We did, sorry, through the chair, we did say, we have no room to put a roundabout that would be effective in that space without taking people's land.
I think there's just not room, is there? That's the point. So, thank you, Leslie.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, getting back to the issue of the retailer or the retailers at that intersection, I thought it might be helpful if you could just assure us, because at the next point there is also food retailers where we already have a set of lights at the Tay and Lindisfarne corner.
Yeah.
Can you assure us that the retailers with this new set of lights going in will be no worse off parking wise than the retailers who are currently functioning and have functioned for some years at the Tay Lindisfarne corner?
They have off-street
lights
parking that
and
exists. They already have off-street parking.
Yeah, I'm just asking, taking into account that they've got a couple of off-street parks, can you say that the street parking for this new division that you're discussing with the retailers, making it no worse than what?
Through the chair, what I can assure you is that we're not going to, we will endeavour to reduce the loss in parking, but we'll try and keep the quantum of parks available to those retailers the same. They may not be in the same place, but they will be within a reasonable distance of those shops.
I'm interested though in this question about whether it's 15 metres or 40 metres. There's a big difference between them. How did you get to the 15 metres? number?
Measure.
15 metres away from it. That's the,
I can tell you in about 2 seconds using Google Maps.
So that was under option 2.
And option 1 says that parking changes result in parks being no further than 15 metres from the shopping area.
Oh, come on.
That's the advantages on option 1.
Is the parking lot on Lindisfarne Street you're talking? Because it's 35 metres, 36 metres.
Page 4 of the report.
You've got a drop in business here, no one's going to drop in, are they?
So the parking would start here.
Well, they don't drop in.
They're still 50 metres.
Yeah.
It's just like up on the corner.
Yeah.
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 So you're literally walking from there to there. Or right there to there.
Yeah. No, look, our apologies. We've identified that that should actually be an advantage under option 2. I think it was a typo.
the line switched on.
Line switch there.
Yeah.
So our apologies for that.
So option 1, how far away would it be? You get a feel for it?
50.
About 40 metres from the front door of Slubaki on Yarrow Street.
Right. I mean, that is a significant difference in terms of the...
On Lindisfarne Street, it'd be about 20 metres from the front door.
Okay. Okay. Evelyn?
So as a person who walks, I don't think it makes much difference, but obviously if you drive a car, perhaps it does. My question was more about the lights are going to be
red, orange and green.
Responsive to traffic, or are they going to be at some point I don't know what the term for it is, but is it timed so that the progression through in the morning is towards town, the progression going home at night is towards the rural area, but during the day, is it just responsive to activities? So if I'm a walker, I want to cross the road, I press the button and the lights change at some
through the
time.
chair, yeah. The way the signals are designed, they're going to the, I think, called the SCAT system, which is the Sydney Coordinated Adaptive Traffic System. Bit of a mouthful. And the way they are both responsive and time related. So the loops, the actuators on the ground, are activated by a certain headway between the traffic. They'll trigger the other phase of the intersection. So it's all fairly well programmed, and so it works between parameters. So how many vehicles go by, it'll give you extra cycle length, extra phase distance, and so on. So, pedestrians can activate it, and that triggers another set of programming functions. So they're very responsive to what's happening. So if we have one leg with a lot of traffic, within the limits of the cycle length, that phase will get more share. And if it's very quiet, it won't. You might notice at night you can sit on the loop, and it will start the function to change. So they have different parameters for different times of the day as well. I don't know if they were isolated at night, do they? Or they're still linked?
They're still linked, but they revert to prioritising Yarrow Street. But again, once a car sits on top of the loop, it activates the cycle to give it the green light, essentially.
Okay. Yep.
So yes, a follow up to that. So when you were looking at the design, did you factor in the potential for more people to be able to cross the road safely at those places who are not in vehicles or on cycles, as in a person crossing, a pedestrian crossing, that this will make it easier for them to cross from one side of Yarrow to the other?
Oh, absolutely. There's the efficiency perspective, but also the safety perspective of pedestrians crossing that intersection. Certainly in my investigations to the site, I can tell you now you're having to dodge traffic to try and cross that road at certain times.
There are parameters for pedestrian crossing times, and allowing for perhaps elderly folk, disabled folk, that sort of thing. So these are all built into the models we put together for the signal operation. So we do try and allow that as much as possible.
So this is part of the consideration for the design was...
Okay,
thank you.
I'll allow 2 more questions and we'll wrap up. Grant?
Yeah, so sort of
Tanya's the last one.
3 around budget. design and cycle count. So I think it's, you know, it's important that we do, and it's probably to you, Erin, around understand what our cycling trajectory is, for want of a better term, and linking that to design. And I noticed with the Burtman Road guys in town, when motorbike sits at a traffic light and there's no car comes along, the lights don't change. And that's the same with a cyclist. So I think that's something around design. But I'm concerned about the hump in the intersection. So is it going to be like the intersection at Windsor between on King Street and Windsor? Is that level of height? Because that's quite significant.
Yep, that's correct.
Well, I think that's absolutely brain dead stupid, because, you know, it's an arterial route. There's a lot of traffic goes both ways along this road. Like Darren, I've travelled this road many a time going through to football, and it's a very busy intersection. We want to make the change, but to put a hump in the road which is probably 6 inches, when cars are going to try and go through that 50 kilometres an hour when they've got a green light heading out of town or down there, it just is brain dead stupid. Like that, I can't believe any engineer would think in an arterial route of significance. I can understand it at Windsor because you're trying to traffic calm and it's a different thing, but this is a major arterial route both ways, and you're going to put a 6-inch hump there. She's going to be yee-haw for the hoons.
I'm happy to take that one as opposed to staff. I think what the team are working towards is best practice standards in road design.
So where is there another example of this anywhere in the
Windsor.
South Island?
Windsor.
That's not a major arterial route both ways.
The point that I'm making
It's
is
busy.
that they are best
They're
practice
busy.
standards. It doesn't mean that that's what we have to do. And if council is giving us a direction that they want us to take some more risk in that space, then that's
It's
something that
nothing
we
to
can
do
look
with
to
that. Yeah,
accommodate.
design can be a brilliant thing on paper, but in pragmatic terms, and you just think through this, if you're going to put 6 inches in the middle of an arterial route, both ways the cars are going to go 50 kilometres an hour, then it just...
So
like,
look,
think about it.
I think it's right that we question that, but I think that we would be much harder on staff if they came to us with a option that was not the safest, and we had to argue up. I mean, better to come with a maximum safety standard and have us question
Yeah, but
whether
where
it's
does it
appropriate.
work? Where is it working, or is it just some sort of dreamed up design that all of a sudden we need to do this, or is it linked to sort of we're trying to slow traffic down and put 30k zones everywhere through our cities? And is it part of that sort of old thinking? Because tell me an intersection in the South Island where I can see this at work through 2 arterial routes and there's a raised thing of 6 inches. You tell me the intersection where that's working.
I'm sure that there would be examples of it, but
I mean,
I'm not sure that that would address the argument. I think there is a concern from council that we may be taking the safety standard too high. We're happy to take direction as staff on that basis, to the acting mayor's point.
Well, you know, I'd be convinced if you can show me an intersection and the anecdotal evidence that this has had by doing this in 2 major arterial routes, the significant positive impact on safety. Show me the evidence and I'll believe it. But if it's just a design feature that's dreamed up by some engineer in a lab, that's all I see it as at the moment. Until you show me the evidence that it actually works somewhere else on 2 major arterial routes, then
So,
I'm not
how,
convinced.
I think, Grant, there is enough concern being expressed about this that it's reasonable to ask officers to take that aspect of option 1 away and think again. I'm inclined to agree with you, if I'm honest. Panya.
Well, and can I actually ask the third one about budget, which raised concern for me, that you're sort of guessing at numbers between 300,000 and 400,000. Surely we've got the disciplines within our infrastructure teams to have much more rigidity around our budgets. We're not just guessing at 300,000 or 400,000 dollars, because that's a big piece of spend. It's over 10% on a project that's under $1 million. So to have guesswork around a project at 10% is not good enough. I mean, sure, we may have contingency, but to have a guesswork at 10% is just worries the living daylights out of me when some of our biggest contracts in infrastructure, and we're taking this approach to it.
Sorry, Chair, that's an unfair criticism. I heard them say that the plans are still being finalised. So until you've got final plans, you're going to have.
But we've got no
estimates.
budget in a planning process.
So why don't we leave the comment as a comment? Panya, your turn.
Okay.
Panya, and then I'm going to take Alex to finish. Okay?
You've already answered the question.
Sorry, you
around-
put your hand up as well, Ria?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll take Panya, then Alex, then you.
You've already answered the question around 15 metres, so I get that. And in relation to Councillor Derry's point, I think you've actually hit the nail on the head, because in Dunedin, when they popped on the one-way system going out and coming in, they had those poles that were set along the road, and I spoke to some cyclists one day, because we'd sort of met them, and they called them hanging men, because no one consulted with them, but they would get caught on them and actually cause accidents. So, I mean, when you just mentioned the 6 inches, I mean, that just sort of gave me the red flag on that. But the point I was actually going to ask about was actually where the retailer is across the road. I see the cycling lane starts and then stops before the actual intersection. Is that diverting onto the footpath? I was just trying to make logic sense out of that, because it sort of starts up. This is on the Linda's farm, going across, but then it goes and stops and then starts around the corner.
Through the chair, I just want to correct one thing first. The raised platform is 75 millimetres. It's 3 inches, not 6. You will feel it, and it's intense. It's to slow people traversing the intersection. It is not a speed hump. I'll let Grant address the cycleway taper.
Okay.
So the cycleway tapers have been designed around the tracking of larger vehicles as well, so it just ties in with the vehicle tracking. So that's why some of them are pushed a little bit further back from the intersection. We're still finalising that last wee detail, and there will be green paint, for the cycle departure lanes, we call them, on the other side of the intersections to help define those areas between the vehicles tracking and the cyclists using the intersection.
Because there's no room for it. I mean, when you're coming down the side. No, there is on this side, but not that.
So which I just go around it.
Opposite. That was just.
You mean coming around from Linda's farm back onto Yarrow?
Yeah.
So when we're cycling down there,
We're cycling down here, so you end up
observing.
They disappear.
And
You disappear.
Just turning left on the road.
What? There's no.
There's no signs. It's just hard.
Carry on.
Sorry, have you got a response to that? What happens to the cycle lane? I think is Panya's.
Perhaps if I can approach Mrs. Cook just to see exactly where she is pointing to on the plan, if that's okay through the chair.
Panya, do you want to restate your question again and show it on the map if you want?
I was just trying to make sense around why the cycling lane started up there and then stopped.
But you can't. But you can't see where you're pointing to something. You can't see it.
Would you mind if I approach you and just?
So you're heading south along Linda's Farm Street.
Yeah.
Heading up to Yarrow Street.
Heading towards
Towards Yarrow
Tay
Street.
Tay Street.
Yeah.
Queen's Drive.
So we.
No,
Yarrow Street.
No, you're coming down Linda's Farm Street, going that way across.
Is this your new one? Yeah.
No, so
Follow road rules.
from here on, you share the lane with traffic.
Good
There's not enough space, unfortunately, to have 2 lanes of traffic plus the cycle lane on that leg. Which is why existing.
Okay, can I suggest that we take that discussion offline? Are you? Panya, Alex.
Oh, that's me. I just wanted to address the Councillor Dermody's questions before about statistics on road users for cycling. There was a report done by Ride Southland, or the by Great South for Ride Southland, on behalf of all the regional councils, and well, our councils, territorial councils, and then all of that data is in that, really, that supports the which supported, I guess, the cycle networks that we have, especially those cycleways on the roads, in particular Yarrow Street, as an arterial way to feed from the inner city out to the east of the city or north of the city, or wherever that is. So that, yeah, like all of that data still exists in that report if you'd like me to dig that up for you. I also sort of wanted to point out that statistically, Invercargill actually really shoots well above its weight in intersection crashes across the national standard. So it's really obvious that in particular these intersections that have been identified, lifting the safety of them is absolutely critical. So I think when we sit here and talk semantics, about where the cycle lane goes or how to make best use of this space, the fundamental is that something needs to happen with this intersection. Whether or not we need a hump in it, I think is, I guess, the topic of discussion, but this absolutely needs to happen. We can't sit here today and go, sorry, no, we don't want the hump, we don't want any of it, because this is so...
Yeah. I think we already agreed at a previous meeting that we did need this. So we're talking now about the detailed design of that rather than whether we're going to have one, Alex. We're certainly going to have one. Sorry, one more, Ria.
I wasn't finished. I wasn't finished.
Alex says that she's not finished, Mr.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were.
So no, I wasn't quite finished. But I just wanted to also mind that we have a procurement process when it comes to major contracts like this. So if, when we go out for bid for whatever contractor it is that wants to take on this particular work for us, there's a very robust procurement contractor. It all gets QS'd internally before they actually take the offers and consider them. So I don't think it's, when they're saying between this and this, it's, I think I'd be confident that there is a really robust process around that.
Although the contractor will
because
follow
we
our
have the
design
procurement
rather
process
than...
that councils run.
Sorry, we will move on, Ria.
So what you alluded to previously, Mr. Acting Mayor, was what I wanted to bring up. Not only that, but the question I had was trucks, the movements of trucks. I know that the Yarra Street is used sometimes if there's a diversion, and so if you're going to have, whether it's a 3-inch or a 6-inch raised area, I believe that would affect the loads of what those trucks are carrying. And to that, when they come down to the other side of it, reduction in firm structure or surface. So I was thinking, I definitely don't have an appetite to have the blasé thing that I don't want to care about the risk of areas and people having crashes. I'd like that to reduce completely. So is there another option, instead of having the hump, to have a slow down lighting prior to coming to that lighting area, like I've seen down on Queen's Drive, past schools, or you come up to schools, there's a slow down area. Is that an option that we can put into the plan?
Through the chair, that's an option whether we do this or not.
Okay.
I think it's a really good option, and they're quite effective from a network-wide basis. And in terms of the hump, they're designed, the standard are designed and approved by NZTA.
Okay.
If we meet that standard, it means that all vehicles can safely passage those things. If you're concerned about noise, there may be noise with a heavy laden truck. That sort of comes with the territory. But these design standards have been used nationally and are in place nationally. So
Correct, and I suspect the hub and having good practice or what have you, it is about determining and making new behaviours to those lights, making people slow down because we're so used to going through them and near misses.
Through the chair, it's a very good point, and I think Councillor Crackett rose that our intersection rates, crash rates here are bad. They're the worst in the country. So we feel that we should address that now. Whether or not those crashes are currently resulting in serious injury and death, the potential sits there constantly because of the numbers that we have.
That's still equating to over $40 million in injuries.
So I think we've gave a really good go to this. It's very appropriate that we do, because I think while everybody accepts that this sort of thing is a professional task to design, and none of us are professionals.
No.
At the same time, I think everybody in Invercargill remembers what happens when we put in the new design corner on a bicycle. Someone on a bicycle was, I think, killed within about 2 or 3 days, right? And that was professionally designed. So it is the right thing for us as councillors to be asking these kind of questions. Now, what I hear is, well, we'll test it in a minute, but what I hear is that we do want to err on the safe side, and therefore option 1 is probably the preferred option. But I think there is a mood against the hump. There is, Darian. So what I would suggest is that we approve option 1, or at least we put the motion that we approve option 1, but at the same time, we ask you, if you wish, to bring back to the next meeting a more of a justification for the raised area, including picking up Grant's point, examples of where it's already used in, you know, significant arterial routes. And I don't mean in Invercargill, because it's not used anywhere in Invercargill for that purpose, but where there are other areas that we could look at or think about that have used that. So would that be, Doug, I mean, you can go and continue to design without knowing the answer to that question immediately, can't you?
Through the chair, certainly the design will work with, if that was an option that we had to remove it. Ideally, good design would say that we would include that. However, Grant and I will go and have a bit of a think about this, and then we'll certainly take your comments on board. Yeah, we'll have a think about it. I do take the concerns on board.
Okay, so I would like to add to approve option 1, so that we have an opportunity to ask for a motion that we approve option 1, but request that, what's it called? What's the right word? What's the name of it? The raised area.
The raised platform.
Raised platform.
The what, sorry?
Raised platform.
That the need for a raised platform is reconsidered, but invite officers to come back to the next meeting if they wish to provide additional justification.
Could I suggest if you're going to amend that you also add in something about the continuing discussions with the retailers about parking spaces and bringing that back at the same time?
Okay, so do you want to wordsmith that for me?
Well, if we get yours up,
right, okay.
We can add something additional on.
Mr. Chair, would we not be better to just defer making a decision on this at all at the moment until we see a different option? Because the option 1 as it is, I don't think anybody, well, half the people here probably don't want to vote for it.
Can I add some?
Some of us are in favour of option 2 anyway, if it was the preferred option. So
the piece that I just raised, and Doug will be able to comment on this more, is that we are at the end of the 3-year NZTA funding cycle. So there is a time piece around delivering this before the end of the financial year. Otherwise, we do lose access to that funding. Doesn't mean we can't push it into the next year, but obviously then it'll come out of that next budget. So I think the team would probably prefer to be able to progress with the design to give us that best chance of meeting that timeline, and I think we can address those concerns as part of that, as opposed to deferring further work on the design.
Okay, so Leslie, do you want to wordsmith a number 4?
I was just thinking we could add on to the end officers being invited to bring back a further paper on the platform. We could probably just add on and include in that paper the outcome of further discussions on parking spaces.
Okay. And the outcome on discussions of parking stations.
The outcome of further discussions with retailers on parking spaces.
Okay. So the question is then whether someone will move those 3 points.
Mr. Chair, you had a mover and a seconder for the original option 1. That was Councillor Ludlow and Councillor Soper.
Given the changes, Dan, are you okay? And Leslie, you continue.
Considering I help wordsmith one of them, yes.
Okay, so I will put the.
It'll be a vigorous
discussion. I will put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Okay, so there was 2.
Noted.
Just you, Alan? Okay. Well, I think and it's very appropriate, I think we've spent more time on that than we've spent in just about anything else that I've heard in the last 18 months. And I think it's appropriate, actually, because, again, I'm going to go back to the bulbous curbs issue. We have got to understand and be thinking about, you know, we may not be experts, but we're all road users. I guess particularly you, Alan. Okay then, so that's carried. Thank you. So that takes us to tab 8, which is the infrastructure asset planning update. And is that you again, Doug?
Indeed it is, Mr. Chairman. This paper is basically covering the changes that the government has indicated and that they're going to include in their policy. It covers particular focus on transport and the moving of funding from mode shift initiatives into accommodating growth in the transport networks across New Zealand. So there is, it's for your information. We will respond when we need to respond. At this stage, we're not required to, and it certainly has an effect of what we're doing now. However, there is a further paper today that will cover some of the funding that we've actually lost in that area.
A comment I would make on this, I think more generally, is that government have a view and have expressed a view that the country cannot afford everything it's been trying to do for the last few years, and that therefore some of these initiatives have been cut from government spending. It means that we're going to end up and are already looking at a list of things which government will no longer fund. So the question is whether that funding can transfer from the taxpayer to the ratepayer, or whether the fact that government has decided not to fund it, we just accept that it's not going to get done. And there may be different decisions on different matters, but if we simply say that everything that was funded through tax will now be funded through rates, then there are, I think, 3 times the number of taxpayers that there are ratepayers. So ratepayers are going to pay 3 times as much per capita as taxpayers were going to. So we will face, I think, quite difficult questions like, do we continue to subsidise, people on buses and so forth? But we, I think just need to bear in mind that government has consciously decided to withdraw from these things because they just don't believe that we can afford them as a country. Okay, so Doug.
Through the chair, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Certainly we've all been aware of the public transport movement of that funding. So it started with half price fares. Now age-related concessions will be disappearing, free travel and so on. So it's really a heads up for council to think about, do we want to respond at some point and address that loss in funding. At some point we may do. I can certainly produce a paper to cover what that might be for public transport essentially, but also our mode shift initiatives that we have with cycling, with getting people out of their cars, so reducing the kilometres travelled in the town. Invercargill was not impacted to the extent that larger cities are. However, the impact is still there. So it's entirely appropriate that we're aware of what the government's direction is going to be. And that I understand the draft is coming out very, very shortly, and I'm happy to produce a paper for that as well to cover what the options are and how that does impact us directly.
I mean, I think it's entirely appropriate that you bring back to this committee what the size of the prize is, if I can put it like that, or what the cost of the overtake, because we need to know that. But I mean, I guess, my view would be, as I stated, that we just cannot take the place of the taxpayer and everything. Sorry, who we got? Evelyn, then Alex.
Yes, just to clarify the public transport impacts, you've said here half-price public transport concessions for community service card holders. That is not that's not Gold Card. That's
community service. That's community
service.
Yeah.
However, the total mobility services, some of that is not Gold Card users, but a lot of it is. So do we have an indication yet what the impact of that will be? Because I know that will be a concern for some people that I represent.
Through the chair, there's been no indication that total mobility funding is going to be touched. It's not been part of the conversations I've had with NZTA, and it's certainly not been flagged by the government to my knowledge. So total mobility sits as a separate funding envelope to public transport.
I think no news is good news, isn't it?
Probably that would be marvellous. If you continue to bring me that good news, I will be really delighted. Because I do think that because we operate instead of regional council in this space, it affects city users particularly, and the total mobility scheme seems to have been very effective in getting some people out of their homes and engaged in the community that were a bit shut in before the improvement of the scheme. So speaking on behalf of those people who get in my ear every now and again, I'm delighted, but how do we have an indication when we will know?
I'm hoping for something in the next month, but government moves the way government moves. So,
Indeed.
So you'll bring back a paper to, I'm sorry, I should take the question, but the intention is that you will bring back a paper to us, Doug, which hopefully by which time, you know, we have a better idea of what's, but again, just quantifying for us what the cost in dollars would be, not per person, but for the council, what the cost would be if we stepped in to take that plate. And it might be that there are areas like that. I mean, you know, what you just said, Evelyn, I'm very sympathetic to. So it might well be that there's some areas that we do want to step into. Leslie.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I was just going to say, if we pass these recommendations, we're asking for Doug to produce 2 papers, fairly detailed papers, one of them on the projects impacted by the initial government change, and the other one by giving us the options for continuation of discounted age-based funding. I think we need all that detail. So I'm just emphasising what you said. It's necessary, and since there's a bit of a question mark about whether the initial changes are going to turn out to be more announcements than we currently have hinted, it may be that we'll ask for a 3rd paper at some stage. But in the meantime, I'm certainly supportive of getting all the information, because we've
so you do want to move those,
and I'm happy to move if no one else has got any questions or for recommendations.
Are there any, is there a seconder?
Oh, I was going to ask a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Grant.
Yeah, it's just with reference to the pump track, and it's stated, and we did have previous discussion around why we're targeting Aurora College for the pump track, and given that we've put the portable one at Russell Square and it's been very successful, why we still seem to be focusing in on Aurora. So could the paper please address where's the best place in South City to have a pump track? Because I'm not convinced it's Aurora, and seeing the evidence at Russell Square the other week, I think it's a very good place for it, but I'd like to see the evidence or the discussion around where the best place is, please.
Okay. Because it's the BMX track.
So having Ria.
So can I seek clarification? I thought that the pump track discussion had already been pre-worked on and pre-picked it, including budgets and position, in previous workshops, and that's why we've got this as it is here.
That's my understanding. So the second stage funding of anything we want to do beyond what we've done now, which we did have planned, has been pulled, and so we have to stop at that point. Okay. So what we have now is what we have and what we're going to have.
But it's, I think you're talking about the portable pump track, aren't you? We've funded that.
Portable one, yeah.
Yeah, we haven't got a permanent.
Okay.
No, and I think Doug's comments around Aurora are simply around the concern around where the funding comes from for that going forward.
Oh.
That project may not go ahead unless somebody now puts forward alternative funding.
Yeah.
Okay, so we already have a mover and Leslie. Will somebody second? Sorry, Evelyn. Any more discussion? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Takes us to the paper on the Climate Emergency Response Fund. Page 82 of board books.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This paper is essentially leading off from the previous discussions we've had about funding and the Climate Emergency Response Fund that you can apply to get mode shift funding for initiatives and infrastructure has now closed.
Okay.
And so it essentially goes over the what we've already just discussed a moment ago.
Are there any questions, Doug? I think we've discussed most of them already. Barry.
Yes, as far as these bike lock-up stands, I don't see Rugby Park marked in anywhere there. I I take my electric bike down there. Well, it's about $3,000 worth of bike. I don't particularly want anyone else to take it away from me. Is there an option to have one at Rugby Park?
Through the chair, the funding at the moment has been pulled, but again, we'll take that under consideration as these sites were the initial rollout, and I think we did work with Cycle South on this one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, will someone move that we receive the report?
Good question.
Thank you. Is that a question?
I was just going to ask a question actually, yeah.
Ah, okay.
Then I'll move it, but I was just,
Right.
a lockable bike stand, I was wondering if you, so they're all on hold at the moment, there's no more at the moment?
Yeah.
I was just going to get a description of what that looked like. I mean, how does that work?
I'll be honest with you, through the chair, councillor, I haven't seen them yet.
Yeah,
They were
no,
pulled before I even got to one.
Okay.
I'll move it.
Thank you. Seconded by Barry. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. And okay, so we've already done the activities report, in which case will somebody move that we move into public excluded? Thank you, Grant. Seconded Barry. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you.